I'm Carol Leff, and I was born December the 21st, 1938. I became a member in the early 70s in Winter Park, Florida. And at the time, the chapter was primarily writers.
When did the two groups then join together?
It wasn't until probably the late 90s.
1998.
They tried a couple of times to get together, but there was kind of, one group was all writers and one was all artists, and they had trouble deciding on things and so forth. But in the mid-90s, when both groups found their membership dwindling, and they did not want to let it just go, felt there was still hope to build it up, then that's when they agreed to join together. When I became a member, there were probably between 45 and 50. And we met at the old Langford Hotel before it was torn down, of course. And that was a great center in Winter Park for artists and writers to winter. So we got to have some very famous people who would come and visit the meetings, or come and maybe do a reading at the meeting, or tell us something about how to become a better writer or artist. It was great.
Wouldn't that be nice?
What happened to that hotel?
It was demolished, and now that big hotel complex in Winter Park and condominiums has taken its place. It was a sad day. Really, we had kind of a goodbye party at the Langford because we all hung out there, and people that worked in Winter Park, which I did because I was editor of the Sun-Herald newspaper, and so we would hang out at the Langford, meet for lunch, meet, some of the visiting writers and artists that were in town, and just kind of have fun there. And of course, Rollins was right there, and a lot of them were speaking at Rollins, or maybe teaching as a guest at Rollins and staying at the Langfords.
Do you know what motivated the original members to create that branch?
Some of the people that were coming down here looked at Winter Park as their second home. A couple of them were already pen women, and then they began to tell the locals what pen women was all about. And a lot of them became very interested because it had a lot of prestige to be a pen woman. And so then they began to gather together and meet, and then the local people got more involved. We shared at every single meeting. We would share accomplishments or what we were doing or whatever. And that was always so fascinating because they were really an active group of people, having art shows somewhere, or just had a new book published or something like that. So it was always exciting to hear those, to hear people share. We, of course, were in the early days involved in the Winter Park Art Festival. Then, while I was editor of the Sun-Herald, was a period when the Winter Park Art Festival kind of fell in popularity because they were allowing too many outside artists in, and the local artists were really pretty upset with that whole idea. And so we, as a matter of fact, it was my own idea with two other Winter Park business people. We approached the city and we started the Autumn Art Festival. And we started it with a group of artists that wanted to keep that flavor of the old Winter Park Art Festival. We did it in October because we were fairly sure the weather might be nice, and it was just delightful. The first couple of years got off to a little slow start, but here we are 36 years later, and it's there were three of us that were in the original committee and actually went to the city. Then there was a group of local, both pen women and other art-related people who helped us put together the judges. I think it was the early 80s. I was elected president, had a great board, and we were still meeting at the Langford. We had a room all to ourselves, and we met once a month.
Oh.
The artist was doing a show. We'd all get together and we'd furnish all the refreshments, and so we supported each other in whatever we were doing. At the time that I was president, I was the editor of the old Winter Park Sun Herald, which was the oldest newspaper in Winter Park at the time. Since then, it's folded. And that helped me to get new people into the group. And we were always encouraged to bring guests, and everybody did a real good job of that. And so we had a lot of people applying for membership during that time. Prior to that stint at the Sun Herald, I worked for what's now the Orlando Sentinel. It used to be called the old Sentinel Star. Sentinel Star.
Yeah.
And I started out as a stringer. A stringer is somebody who they allow you to write, give you assignments and everything, and you're paid by the inch of print. And then I became a columnist. And
what was the name of your column?
Positively. And then I wrote human interest stories, took photography, took pictures. And then I worked for the old Winter Park Bureau of the Sentinel Star, and cut my experiences there with some wonderful regional editors. Rollins College used to have a writers' conference every year, and they'd bring all kinds of famous people in. One of the most wonderful times for me was when I got to meet Alex Haley, and he was just finishing Roots at the time, and he had written a book about Malcolm X. Just so approachable. And then he told us the story about how many times Roots had been rejected, which was something like 30 times before it was picked up and published. And I did magazine writing for years. Then I became editor of the Godly Businesswoman magazine, which was located up in the Longwood area.
Writing that you're doing now, that you're actively...
I work for a family foundation, and we give grants to nonprofit organizations. And I'm in charge, as well as handling the grant requests as they come in. I'm in charge of developing and keeping the website up to date. So I don't remember any group shows. Lots of individual shows, lots of participation in the Disney Art Festival, the, of course, Winter Park, both Winter Park festivals. Maitland has a wonderful festival. And so there was a lot of participation in those kinds of things. There were a lot of women that were writers and speakers, which I do as well. I do some speaking. And they would also have events.
But it was more individual.
It was more individual, but the support
right.
of the group.
Yes, yes. And the reasons for the decrease in membership.
A lot of it was that people became so busy. It was hard for them to attend meetings. They began to just pull away because of that. The organization, our particular organization, began to age. We hadn't been able to attract younger members, partly, I think, because they didn't know about Penn Women, and partly because they were terribly busy. And it also became the time, was in the middle of the time when networking became so important to young women, developing their careers. And ours wasn't a group that you networked. You just came, enjoyed the company of other creative people, and what do they call, brochures or whatever, that told about every member and what you were doing, and they always passed those out right after dues were collected. It was how we did a newsletter and made sure that it got out maybe 10 days prior to a meeting.
Is there any other information you'd like to share?
Gosh, I can't think of anything offhand.